Mitchell, I need to see you in my office. Now. I looked up from my computer to see Derek Evans standing at my cubicle entrance, his expression a carefully controlled mask of professional disapproval. As the regional director of our investment firm, his requests were never optional, regardless of how they were phrased. Of course, I replied, trying to sound casual while mentally running through a list of my recent work. Had I made an error on the Phillips account? Was my last presentation below standard? I'll be right there. Derek nodded curtly before turning and walking back toward his corner office, his posture military straight as always. I quickly saved my work, straightened my tie, and followed him, a knot forming in my stomach. One-on-one meetings with Derek rarely ended well for anyone. His office was exactly what you'd expect from someone like him, meticulously organized, decorated with sailing photographs and framed awards, not a paper out of place on his immaculate desk. The view of downtown stretched behind him, an appropriate backdrop for someone who seemed to view the rest of us as beneath him. Close the door, he instructed, settling into his leather chair. I did as he asked and sat in the uncomfortable chair opposite his desk, the one I suspected he'd chosen specifically to keep visitors off balance. Is everything all right with the Westridge portfolio? I asked, trying to get ahead of whatever criticism was coming. This isn't about Westridge, Derek said, folding his hands on his desk. This is about your personal situation affecting your professional performance. I blinked, genuinely confused. My personal situation? Your divorce, Mitchell. He spoke the word with a slight hint of distaste. It's been, 4 months now? And your performance metrics have been declining steadily for the past 3. The bluntness of his statement knocked the wind out of me. Yes, my marriage of 6 years to Eliza had ended 4 months ago when she'd left me for her coworker. And yes, I'd been struggling, who wouldn't? But I'd been certain I was keeping my personal tragedy safely contained, showing up, doing my job, maintaining a professional facade despite feeling like my life was collapsing. I wasn't aware my numbers had dropped significantly, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. Derek swiveled his monitor so I could see the screen. A colorful graph displayed my performance metrics over the past year: client retention, new acquisitions, portfolio growth. The downward trend over the last quarter was unmistakable, though not as dramatic as his tone had suggested. I understand personal difficulties happen, Derek continued, his voice carrying the artificial compassion of someone who had practiced sounding human. But this company expects its employees to handle their private lives without letting it impact their work. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully. I'll make sure to turn those numbers around immediately. That's not all, Derek continued, leaning back in his chair. Several colleagues have mentioned you've been less than pleasant to be around lately. Withdrawn in meetings, missing team lunches, turning down happy hours. I stared at him, disbelieving. I was being reprimanded for not being cheerful enough while going through a divorce? For choosing to work through lunch rather than make small talk with coworkers while my heart was shattered? I didn't realize social participation was a job requirement, I said, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. Derek's eyes narrowed. It's not officially, no. But team cohesion matters, Mitchell. And your attitude affects those around you. I bit back a more caustic response. I'll make an effort to be more engaged. Here's the thing, Derek said, leaning forward and lowering his voice as if sharing a confidence, though it felt more like a threat. I need people on my team who can handle life's difficulties without falling apart, who can be better men. That phrase, better men, hung in the air between us, loaded with judgment. Marriages end, Derek continued, his tone suggesting he was imparting great wisdom. It's unfortunate, but professionals find ways to compartmentalize. They don't bring their personal failures into the workplace. Personal failures. As if my divorce had been solely my responsibility, a reflection of some fundamental deficiency in my character rather than the complicated unraveling of two people who had once loved each other. My numbers will improve, I said flatly, unwilling to engage with his assessment of my character or my marriage. See that they do, Derek replied. And Mitchell? Try to remember that the way a man handles adversity defines him. Be someone your colleagues can respect again. I left his office in a fog of humiliation and anger. Be a better man? From Derek Evans, of all people, a man known throughout the company for taking credit for others' work, for berating subordinates until they were nearly in tears, for creating a culture of fear rather than collaboration. His hypocrisy was breathtaking. Back at my desk, I tried to focus on work, but Derek's words kept replaying in my mind. Personal failures. Better man. Respect. The irony wasn't lost on me that his pep talk had likely done more damage to my productivity than my divorce had. That evening, I stayed late, deliberately working until the office had emptied. The last thing I needed was forced small talk with colleagues who had apparently been discussing my post-divorce demeanor. When I finally left around 8:30, the security guard gave me a sympathetic nod. He'd seen plenty of us worker bees staying after hours, trying to impress management or simply avoid going home to empty apartments. My own apartment was exactly that, empty. Eliza had taken most of our furniture in the split, claiming she needed it for her new place with Jason. I'd been too exhausted by the whole process to argue, so I was left with a Spartan living room containing just a couch, a coffee table, and a TV mounted on the wall. The bedroom wasn't much better, just a bed and a dresser. I hadn't bothered decorating, partly due to lack of energy and partly because I wasn't sure I'd stay in this hollow reminder of my failed marriage. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, one more than usual, a small rebellion against Derek's judgment, and sank onto my couch. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Kate, checking in. "You okay? Dinner this weekend?" Kate had been my rock throughout the divorce, letting me crash at her place during the worst of it, listening to me cycle through anger and grief without judgment. Unlike Derek, she understood that healing wasn't a linear process with a convenient timetable. "Rough day. Boss basically told me to man up about the divorce. But I'm fine. Dinner sounds good." Her response came quickly, "Your boss sounds like an ass. Sunday at 6? I'll cook." I smiled for what felt like the first time that day. "Perfect. I'll bring wine." Setting my phone aside, I took a sip of bourbon and let my head fall back against the couch. "Be a better man." The phrase kept echoing, grating against my already raw nerves. What exactly did Derek think that meant? Someone who didn't feel pain? Who could watch their life implode and respond with nothing more than a professional smile and improved sales metrics? Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work with renewed determination, not because of Derek's advice, but despite it. I stayed later, came in earlier, took fewer breaks. I smiled mechanically in meetings, forced myself to attend team lunches, and made empty small talk about sports I didn't follow. My performance metrics began to climb, slowly but steadily. Derek noticed, of course. "Good to see you turning things around, Mitchell," he commented during our team meeting, his tone suggesting he was personally responsible for my improvement. "That's the kind of resilience we value here." I nodded and thanked him, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. The truth was, I wasn't healing, I was just getting better at pretending. The emptiness followed me home each night to my still barren apartment, where I'd fall asleep staring at the ceiling, wondering if this hollow performance was what being a better man meant. 2 months after Derek's lecture, our firm held its annual Client Appreciation Gala, a lavish affair at the Westbrook Hotel where our wealthiest clients mingled with firm leadership over premium open bars and gourmet hors d'oeuvres. Attendance was mandatory for all investment advisors, another unwritten rule of Derek's department. I arrived exactly on time, not early enough to seem eager but not late enough to draw attention. The hotel ballroom was elegantly decorated, soft lighting creating a flattering glow over the gathering crowd. I grabbed a scotch from the bar, just one, carefully nursing it to maintain perfect professional composure, and began making my rounds, checking in with my clients and making the expected small talk. I was deep in conversation with the Andersons, a retired couple whose portfolio I managed, when Derek's voice boomed behind me. "Mitchell. There you are. I want you to meet someone." I turned to find Derek standing with a striking woman I'd never seen before. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with dark hair falling in soft waves to her shoulders and intelligent eyes that assessed me with open curiosity. "This is Vanessa Carter," Derek said, his hand possessively settling at the small of her back. "My girlfriend. Vanessa, this is Mitchell Reed, one of our senior investment advisors." "Nice to meet you," I said, extending my hand. "Likewise," she replied, her grip firm, her smile genuine in a way Derek's never was. "I've heard a lot about you." That surprised me. "All good, I hope." "Derek says you've really turned things around lately," she said, her eyes flicking toward Derek and back to me. "That you've shown impressive resilience." I maintained my professional smile while wondering exactly what Derek had told her about me. Had he shared his assessment of my personal failures with her over dinner? Used me as an example of how not to handle adversity? Mitchell was going through a rough patch, Derek explained to her, his tone patronizing. But he took my advice to heart, and now he's back on track. The smug satisfaction in his voice made my jaw clench, but I kept my expression neutral. "The Andersons were just telling me about their trip to Greece," I said, deliberately changing the subject. "It sounds amazing." The conversation shifted to safer territory, travel, the event, firm gossip, but throughout, I noticed Vanessa watching me with a subtle interest that seemed independent of Derek's presence. She was clearly intelligent and well-informed, occasionally steering the conversation toward politics or literature, only to have Derek guide it back to business or his recent sailing competition. "I need to say hello to the Harises," Derek announced eventually, scanning the room. "Mitchell, make sure Vanessa isn't bored while I'm gone." He kissed her cheek and departed, leaving us in a momentarily awkward silence. "So," Vanessa said once he was out of earshot, "what was this rough patch Derek mentioned? If you don't mind my asking." I hesitated, unsure how much to share with my boss's girlfriend. "Divorce," I said finally, keeping it simple. "About 6 months ago now." "I'm sorry," she replied, and unlike Derek's manufactured compassion, her sympathy seemed genuine. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. Still is, sometimes," I admitted, then immediately regretted the honesty. "But it's getting better." Vanessa nodded, taking a sip of her wine. "And Derek's advice, was it actually helpful, or just Derek being Derek?" The question caught me off guard. There was something knowing in her tone, as if she was familiar with Derek's particular brand of guidance. "He suggested I needed to be a better man," I said carefully. "To compartmentalize more effectively." She rolled her eyes, the gesture subtle but unmistakable. "Of course he did. Derek believes emotions are inefficient. Unless they're his, of course." Now it was my turn to be curious. "You don't share that philosophy?" "Hardly," she said with a small laugh. "I'm a psychologist. I tend to think suppressing emotions just sends them underground where they cause more trouble." "A psychologist? That's an interesting match." The words slipped out before I could censor them. Rather than being offended, Vanessa smiled, a hint of mischief in her expression. "You mean, what's a psychologist doing with someone who has the emotional intelligence of a turnip?" I nearly choked on my scotch. "I wouldn't have put it quite that way. But you wouldn't disagree," she countered, still smiling. "It's okay. I'm under no illusions about Derek's limitations. We all have our reasons for the relationships we choose." Before I could respond to that intriguing statement, Derek reappeared, his hand immediately finding its place on Vanessa's back again, a gesture that seemed more about ownership than affection. "The Harises send their regards," he told her, then turned to me. "Mitchell, the Blackwells just arrived. They've been considering increasing their investment. You should go speak with them." The dismissal was clear. I nodded, wished Vanessa a pleasant evening, and moved away, my mind lingering on our brief conversation. There had been something in her manner, a spark of independence, perhaps, or a hint of discontent, that suggested Derek's relationship wasn't as perfect as he undoubtedly believed it to be. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of client conversations and networking efforts. I spotted Vanessa and Derek several times across the room, him holding court with senior executives, her smiling politely beside him, occasionally scanning the crowd as if looking for more interesting company. As the event wound down, I was gathering my coat from the check station when I felt a presence beside me. "Looks like we had the same idea," Vanessa said, handing her ticket to the attendant. "Escaping while the diehards closed down the bar." "Some of us have early meetings tomorrow," I replied. "Where's Derek?" "Still talking about himself to anyone who'll listen," she said with a wry smile. "He texted that he'll be at least another hour and to take a cab home if I'm tired." The attendant returned with our coats. I helped Vanessa into hers, a gesture of simple courtesy. "Thank you," she said, turning to face me, "for the coat, and for the most interesting conversation I've had all evening. Even though it was about my divorce and your boyfriend's questionable emotional intelligence?" She laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Especially because of that. Honesty is refreshing." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, offering it to me. "If you ever want to continue our conversation, without the constraints of a work event." I took the card automatically, surprised by the implied invitation. "I don't think Derek would appreciate that." "Probably not," she agreed, her eyes meeting mine directly. "But Derek doesn't dictate my friendships." With that, she smiled once more and departed, leaving me standing there with her card in my hand, unsure of what had just transpired. Later that night, in my quiet apartment, I studied her card, Vanessa Carter, Ph.D., clinical psychologist, followed by her office address, phone number, and email. I wondered what exactly she had meant by her parting comment. Was she simply being friendly to someone she perceived as needing support? Was she deliberately trying to undermine Derek? Or was there something more personal in her interest? And more importantly, why was I even considering these questions about my boss's girlfriend? I placed the card on my nightstand, telling myself I wouldn't use it. Getting involved in any capacity with Derek's girlfriend would be professional suicide, not to mention ethically questionable given what little I knew about their relationship. Yet as I drifted off to sleep, Derek's condescending advice echoed in my mind, be a better man. The irony wasn't lost on me that Derek himself might benefit from that same advice in his relationship with Vanessa, a woman who clearly deserved more attention and respect than he seemed capable of giving. Little did I know then how that business card would eventually lead to a reckoning none of us saw coming. The morning after the gala, I arrived at the office to find an email from Derek requesting a progress update on the Hamilton account, an account he knew perfectly well was proceeding exactly as planned. It was typical Derek behavior, asserting control through unnecessary oversight, reminding everyone of the hierarchy. I provided the requested update promptly and professionally, then turned my attention to actual work that needed doing. Throughout the day, Vanessa's business card sat in my wallet, an unwelcome distraction. I had no intention of contacting her, yet I couldn't bring myself to throw the card away either. Heard you met the girlfriend last night, said a voice from my doorway. I looked up to see Tasha, one of our senior analysts and the closest thing I had to a friend in the office. She leaned against my door frame, coffee mug in hand, eyebrows raised in expectation. Yeah, briefly, I replied, trying to sound casual. Seems nice. Nice? Tasha scoffed, stepping into my office and closing the door. She's brilliant. PhD from Yale, published in major journals, runs that fancy therapy center downtown. What she's doing with Derek is the office mystery of the year. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the gossip despite my own curiosity. People have their reasons. Well, word is they've been fighting lately, Tasha continued, lowering her voice. Rachel from accounting saw them having a tense conversation in the parking garage last week. Apparently, Vanessa told Derek he was being emotionally withholding, which, that's like saying water is wet. Tasha, I cautioned, I really don't need to be involved in my boss's relationship drama. She studied me for a moment, then shrugged. Fair enough. Just thought you'd want to know the context since she seemed pretty interested in talking to you last night. You noticed that? Everyone noticed that, Tasha replied with a smirk. Derek certainly did. You might want to watch your back. After Tasha left, I tried to refocus on work, but her warning lingered. Had I inadvertently stepped into some power struggle between Derek and Vanessa? The last thing I needed was to become collateral damage in their relationship problems. For the next 2 weeks, I buried myself in work, putting in extra hours to ensure my performance metrics continued their upward trajectory. Derek maintained his usual aloof management style, neither particularly critical nor approving. If he harbored any resentment about Vanessa's attention toward me at the gala, he didn't show it. I had almost convinced myself the entire interaction with Vanessa had been insignificant when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mitchell, this is Vanessa Carter. Hope you don't mind, but I got your number from Derek's contacts. I'm putting together a panel discussion on financial stress and mental health at the community center next month. Given your professional expertise, would you be interested in participating? No pressure. I stared at the message, uncertainty churning in my stomach. The request seemed legitimate and professional, yet I couldn't shake the feeling there was more to it, especially given her method of obtaining my number. After careful consideration, I replied, Hello Vanessa. Interesting topic, but I should probably check with Derek first about any public speaking representing the firm. Her response came quickly. This wouldn't be representing the firm, just sharing general expertise as a financial professional. But I understand your caution. If it helps, Derek knows I'm recruiting panelists. I mentioned you specifically as someone who might have valuable insights. That changed things. If Derek was aware and hadn't objected, participating couldn't be seen as overstepping boundaries. Still, I decided to verify directly. I walked to Derek's office, finding his door open as he reviewed documents on his computer. Got a minute? I asked from the doorway. He glanced up, his expression neutral. What is it, Mitchell? Vanessa just contacted me about participating in a panel discussion she's organizing. Wanted to make sure that's okay with you before I respond. Derek's face remained impassive, but I noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. Ah, yes. The mental health thing. She mentioned she was looking for a financial perspective. He paused, seeming to consider his response. If you're interested, go ahead. Just be clear you're not speaking as an official representative of the firm. Of course, I agreed. Thank you. As I turned to leave, Derek added, and Mitchell? Keep it professional. The warning was clear, though unnecessary. I had no intention of being anything but professional with my boss's girlfriend. Back at my desk, I texted Vanessa. Spoke with Derek. Happy to participate in the panel. Let me know details when you have them. Over the next week, Vanessa and I exchanged occasional texts about the panel, logistics, topics to be covered, the other participants, a psychiatrist, a career counselor, and a debt recovery specialist. Our conversations remained strictly professional, though I couldn't help noticing how quickly she responded to my messages, often within minutes regardless of the time of day. The panel was scheduled for a Wednesday evening at the downtown community center. I arrived early, dressed in a business casual outfit that struck the right balance between professional and approachable. The center's meeting room had been arranged with a long table at the front, microphones set up for each panelist, and rows of chairs for the audience. "Mitchell, you made it." I turned to see Vanessa approaching, dressed in a simple but elegant blazer and skirt, her professional demeanor somehow more natural than Derek's carefully cultivated executive presence. "Thanks for inviting me," I replied. "Seems like an important topic." "Absolutely is," she agreed. "Financial stress is one of the most common issues my patients struggle with, yet most mental health professionals aren't equipped to provide practical financial guidance." She introduced me to the other panelists as they arrived, her manner warm but entirely professional. If I hadn't witnessed that moment of candor at the gala, I would never have suspected any complexity beneath her poised exterior. The event went smoothly, with each of us addressing different aspects of financial wellness and its impact on mental health. When my turn came, I spoke about practical strategies for regaining financial control during major life transitions, drawing subtly on my own divorce experience without explicitly mentioning it. During the audience Q&A, someone asked about navigating financial infidelity, hidden spending, secret accounts, financial deception between partners. As the question was directed at me, I answered carefully, discussing transparency and communication, rebuilding trust through accountability. "I'd like to add to that," Vanessa interjected when I finished. "Financial infidelity often mirrors emotional infidelity. People who withhold information about money are frequently withholding in other areas as well, their feelings, their needs, their authentic selves. The patterns tend to be consistent across different domains of intimacy." Her words weren't directed at me specifically, yet I felt a strange resonance with them. Had Eliza's emotional withdrawal preceded her actual infidelity? Had my own tendency to internalize stress rather than share it contributed to our communication breakdown? After the event concluded and the audience dispersed, Vanessa approached me as I gathered my notes. "You were excellent," she said. "Your advice about creating a financial recovery plan post-divorce was particularly helpful. I know several patients who could benefit from that approach." "Thanks," I replied. The whole panel was impressive. "You moderated it beautifully. A few of us are grabbing a quick drink to decompress," she continued. "Would you like to join? The psychiatrist has some interesting thoughts on the intersection of financial advice and therapy that might interest you." I hesitated, Derek's warning echoing in my mind. But this was a professional gathering with multiple participants, hardly inappropriate. "Sure," I agreed. One quick drink. The quick drink turned into 2 hours of fascinating conversation. Dr. Levine, the psychiatrist, did indeed have thought-provoking perspectives on how financial advisors might better serve clients experiencing major life transitions. The career counselor shared stories about clients whose financial fears prevented necessary career changes. Vanessa facilitated the discussion with genuine intellectual curiosity, drawing connections between our different disciplines. Throughout the evening, I found myself increasingly engaged and, surprisingly, enjoying myself more than I had in months. These were people who talked about meaningful issues, who listened attentively, who built upon each other's ideas rather than competing for attention. It was refreshingly unlike the forced socializing at office events. Gradually, our colleagues departed until only Vanessa and I remained, finishing our drinks. "This was really great," I said, glancing at my watch with surprise at how late it had become. "I should probably head out too. Early meeting tomorrow." "Of course," she replied. "I've kept you too long already. Let me walk out with you." Outside the bar, the spring evening was pleasantly cool, the streets relatively quiet. "Which direction are you headed?" I asked. "I'm just a few blocks east," she said. "You?" "West, to the parking garage." She nodded, a brief silence falling between us. "You know, Mitchell, what you said tonight about rebuilding after major life changes, it resonated with me. We're all works in progress, aren't we?" "I suppose we are," I agreed, curious about what personal circumstance she might be referring to but not wanting to pry. "Derek mentioned your divorce was difficult," she continued carefully, "that you struggled with it professionally for a while." I tensed slightly, wondering exactly how Derek had framed it. "It was unexpected," I admitted. And yes, it affected me. But I'm doing better now. I can see that, she said, studying me with that same direct gaze I remembered from the gala. There's a clarity about you, like someone who's been through the fire and emerged stronger. The compliment caught me off guard. That's a generous interpretation. Derek would probably say I just learned to compartmentalize better. Ah, Derek's favorite skill, she replied, a hint of something sharp in her tone. The man can put anything in a box and seal it away, including his own humanity. The statement hung in the air, too personal, too revealing. We both recognized the line that had been crossed. I'm sorry, she said quickly. That was unprofessional of me. Please forget I said it. Already forgotten, I assured her, though it was a lie. Her words confirmed what I'd suspected, that their relationship was strained, that Derek's emotional limitations were taking a toll. I should go, she said, gesturing eastward. Thank you again for participating tonight. You made a real difference for some people in that audience. It was my pleasure, I replied sincerely. Good night, Vanessa. Good night, Mitchell. As I walked to my car, I felt an unexpected lightness. The evening had been intellectually stimulating and emotionally refreshing, a reminder that there was life beyond my apartment and the office, that I could still connect meaningfully with others despite the walls I'd built after Eliza left. But Vanessa's comment about Derek troubled me. Not because I particularly cared about Derek's relationship issues, but because I found myself caring about her frustration. That was dangerous territory, especially given my professional subordination to Derek. The next morning, Derek appeared at my office door, his expression unreadable. How was the panel? He asked without preamble. It went well, I replied, maintaining a neutral tone. Good turnout, engaged audience, valuable discussion. Vanessa said you were quite impressive, he continued, watching me carefully. That your insights on financial recovery after divorce were particularly helpful. That's kind of her to say. The whole panel was strong. Derek nodded, his gaze still assessing. She mentioned you all went for drinks afterward to continue the discussion. Yes, with Dr. Levine and Ms. Patel, I confirmed, deliberately mentioning the other panelists. We had an interesting conversation about potential collaborations between financial advisors and mental health professionals. Something in Derek's posture relaxed slightly. Good. Glad it was productive. He turned to leave, then added, Vanessa can be enthusiastic about her work, gets carried away with new ideas and connections. Don't let it distract you from your actual priorities here. The warning was subtle but clear. Don't get too friendly with my girlfriend. Understood, I replied professionally. The Hamilton portfolio review is still my top priority this week. After Derek left, I received a text from Vanessa. Just wanted to thank you again for last night. Your contribution was invaluable, and the conversation afterward was the highlight of my week. Would love to continue our discussion about potential client resources sometime. I stared at the message, uncertain how to respond. The content was entirely professional, yet coming the morning after her revealing comment about Derek, it carried an undercurrent of something more personal. I opted for a polite but slightly distant reply. Happy to have participated. The panel was excellently organized. If you'd like to discuss resource development further, perhaps we could schedule something through Derek's assistant to ensure it aligns with firm priorities. Her response didn't come for several hours. Of course. Very appropriate. I'll reach out to Melanie to find a suitable time that works for everyone. Thanks again. The formality of her message suggested I'd successfully conveyed my boundary. It was the right thing to do, the professional thing, the ethical thing. So why did I feel a twinge of regret? Over the next 2 weeks, I immersed myself in work, deliberately avoiding any situation where I might encounter Vanessa. When Derek mentioned an upcoming dinner party at his home, I claimed a prior commitment with my sister. When the community center sent a follow-up email about future panels, I forwarded it to our marketing department rather than responding personally. I was doing exactly what a better man should do, maintaining appropriate professional boundaries, respecting my boss's relationship, focusing on my career recovery. Yet Derek's behavior toward me grew increasingly cool, his critiques more pointed, his oversight more intrusive. The Jacobson presentation needs work, he announced during our team meeting, singling me out though the presentation had been a group effort. Mitchell, the risk assessment section is particularly weak. Revise it by end of day. Later that same week, he questioned my client management approach in front of senior leadership, suggesting I was too conservative in my investment recommendations, the exact opposite of the criticism he'd leveled just months earlier when he'd called me recklessly optimistic about market projections. Is Derek on some kind of vendetta against you? Tasha asked after a particularly brutal budget review where he'd questioned every line item of my department's quarterly expenditures. I have no idea, I replied truthfully. Maybe he's just having a bad month. But as Derek's criticism intensified, I began to wonder if his personal frustrations were being directed at me specifically. Had Vanessa mentioned our conversation after the panel? Was he jealous of our brief professional interaction? It seemed absurd, yet his targeting felt too deliberate to be coincidental. The situation came to a head 3 weeks after the panel, when Derek called me into his office late on a Friday afternoon. "Close the door," he instructed, his tone ominous. I complied, already bracing for whatever criticism was coming. "I've been reviewing your client communications," he began, tapping a folder on his desk. "And I'm concerned about your messaging regarding market volatility. You're being overly cautious, potentially alarming clients unnecessarily." "I'm being realistic," I countered, my patience wearing thin after weeks of hypercriticism. "The indicators suggest increased volatility in the next quarter. I'm preparing clients appropriately." "Your job is to instill confidence, not caution," Derek insisted. "This risk-averse approach isn't what we need right now. My job is to give clients accurate information so they can make informed decisions," I replied, struggling to maintain a professional tone. "Not to sugarcoat market conditions to protect our short-term profits." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Are you questioning my leadership, Mitchell?" "I'm defending my professional judgment," I said evenly. "The same judgment you hired me for." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with cold calculation. "You know, I gave you a lot of leeway during your divorce. Kept you on despite declining performance. Offered guidance when you were clearly floundering. And this is how you repay that consideration? With insubordination?" The injustice of his revisionist history pushed me past my breaking point. "That's not how I remember it, Derek. I remember being told my personal tragedy was a failure that I needed to hide better. I remember being criticized for not attending happy hours while going through the worst period of my life. I remember being told to be a better man by someone who wouldn't recognize authentic masculinity if it introduced itself with a business card." The words escaped before I could censor them, hanging in the air between us like a thrown gauntlet. Derek's face flushed with anger. "Careful, Mitchell. Very careful. Your position here isn't as secure as you might think." "Is that a threat?" I asked, past caring about the consequences. "Because if you're going to fire me for maintaining my professional integrity, I'd rather know now." A tense silence filled the room as we stared at each other across his desk, the power dynamic suddenly uncertain. Finally, Derek spoke, his voice controlled but tight with suppressed rage. "Take the weekend to reconsider your approach. I expect a revised client communication strategy on my desk Monday morning." "Fine," I replied, standing to leave. "Will there be anything else?" "Yes," he said, his expression hardening. "Vanessa and I are hosting a dinner party tomorrow evening for key firm leadership. Your attendance is expected." 7 o'clock. It was a power move, pure and simple, forcing me into his home territory after our confrontation, making me play nice in front of colleagues and his girlfriend. "I'll be there," I agreed flatly. As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a text. I expected it to be Tasha, who had witnessed me being summoned to Derek's lair, but instead it was Vanessa. "I heard you're finally coming to dinner tomorrow. Looking forward to continuing our conversation from the panel. Don't worry about Derek, he's all bark, no bite." I stared at the message, wondering how she knew about my confrontation with Derek so quickly, and what exactly she meant by that last comment. It suggested both that she knew Derek was targeting me and that she was unconcerned about it, perhaps even amused. For the first time, I wondered if Vanessa was deliberately playing some game between Derek and me, using our mutual antagonism for her own purposes. The thought was unsettling, yet I couldn't dismiss it entirely. That evening, nursing a bourbon in my still minimalist apartment, I contemplated my options. I could start looking for another job, avoiding the increasingly toxic situation with Derek. I could attempt to smooth things over, revert to being the compliant employee who accepted his criticism without pushback. Or I could attend the dinner party and see exactly what dynamics were at play between Derek and Vanessa, potentially gaining insight that might help me navigate the situation. As I pondered these alternatives, a more troubling question emerged. Why did I care about Vanessa's opinion of me? Why had her text, implying some alliance between us against Derek, given me a small thrill of satisfaction despite my professional concerns? The truth was uncomfortable. Despite my best efforts at maintaining boundaries, I was drawn to Vanessa. Not just physically, though she was undeniably attractive, but intellectually and emotionally. Our brief interactions had revealed a depth and authenticity that contrasted sharply with Derek's superficial charm and calculated maneuvers. Derek had told me to be a better man. The irony was that the qualities he'd meant, stoicism, compartmentalization, unyielding focus on professional success, were exactly the ones Vanessa seemed to find lacking in him. The emotional intelligence, genuine empathy, and authentic self-expression that Derek dismissed as weaknesses appeared to be what Vanessa valued most. As I finished my bourbon, I made my decision. I would attend the dinner party, not to appease Derek or to further any inappropriate interest in Vanessa, but to reclaim my own agency in a situation where I'd been allowing others to dictate the narrative. I would be professional, cordial, and observant, gathering information that would help me make my next move, whether that was finding a new job or finding a way to neutralize Derek's hostility. What I didn't anticipate was how dramatically one dinner party could change everything, or how Derek's demand that I be a better man would come back to haunt him in ways none of us expected. Derek's house was exactly what I expected, a sprawling contemporary in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, all clean lines and strategic lighting designed to impress rather than welcome. I arrived precisely at 7, bottle of wine in hand, prepared for an evening of professional theater. A housekeeper answered the door, directing me to the expansive living room where several colleagues were already gathered, cocktails in hand. Derek stood near the fireplace, holding court with our CFO and 2 senior partners. Vanessa was across the room, deep in conversation with Melanie, Derek's assistant. "Mitchell, you made it," Derek called, his tone pleasant but eyes cool, maintaining the fiction that nothing was amiss between us. "Help yourself to a drink. Dinner will be served at 8. I nodded my thanks, moving toward the bar setup in the corner. As I poured myself a modest scotch, I felt a presence beside me. "I recommend adding just a splash of water," Vanessa said quietly. "It opens up the flavor of that particular brand." I glanced at her, surprised by her sudden appearance and specific knowledge of Scotch. "You're a whiskey expert as well as a psychologist?" She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "I dated a distiller in graduate school. Some knowledge lingers longer than the relationship itself." I followed her suggestion, adding a few drops of water to my glass. "Thanks for the tip. And thank you for coming," she replied. "I know Derek's been difficult lately." Before I could respond to that loaded statement, Derek appeared beside us, his arm sliding possessively around Vanessa's waist. "Giving away my good Scotch, darling?" "Just ensuring your guests appreciate it properly," she replied, her smile shifting to something more performative. "Mitchell doesn't need instruction on appreciation," Derek said, his casual tone belied by the pointed look he gave me. "He's very good at recognizing value when he sees it." The double meaning wasn't subtle. I raised my glass slightly in acknowledgement. "Excellent Scotch, Derek. Your taste is impeccable as always." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of more guests, allowing me to slip away from the tense triangle we'd formed. I circulated through the gathering, making professional small talk with colleagues, all while keenly aware of the undercurrents flowing beneath the social niceties. Derek spent the cocktail hour moving strategically from group to group, always within sight of Vanessa yet rarely by her side. She, in turn, engaged warmly with every guest, her natural charisma making even the most awkward executives relax in her presence. Several times, I caught her glancing in my direction, though she made no further attempt to approach me directly. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, an impressive spread catered by one of the city's top restaurants. I found myself seated midway down the table, flanked by a senior partner's wife and one of our compliance officers, safe, neutral territory far from both Derek at the head of the table and Vanessa at its middle. The conversation flowed predictably through market projections, real estate values, and carefully sanitized political opinions. I participated just enough to appear engaged while observing the dynamics unfolding around me. Halfway through the main course, Vanessa subtly shifted the discussion. "I'm curious," she said during a momentary lull, "how do all of you balance the emotional aspects of financial advising? When clients are making decisions driven by fear or overconfidence rather than data?" The question created a ripple of hesitation around the table. Emotional aspects weren't typically discussed in our firm's culture, where numbers and analytics reigned supreme. Derek responded first, his tone dismissive. "Professional advisors maintain objectivity. We don't let emotions cloud judgment, ours or our clients." "But isn't acknowledging emotion different from being clouded by it?" Vanessa pressed gently. Mitchell's presentation at the community center addressed this beautifully, how financial decisions during major life transitions are inevitably influenced by emotional states, and how advisors can help clients navigate that complexity. All eyes turned to me, including Derek's suddenly sharp gaze. I simply suggested that understanding a client's emotional context can help us provide more effective guidance, I said carefully. People make financial decisions for reasons that go beyond pure mathematics, especially during periods of significant change. Exactly, Vanessa agreed, her expression animated. It's about integration rather than compartmentalization. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. While that's an interesting theoretical approach, Mitchell, our firm's success has been built on analytical rigor, not psychological handholding. With respect, I responded, emboldened by Vanessa's support. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. Understanding the human element makes our analytical expertise more applicable to real-world client situations. A murmur of agreement passed through several dinner guests. I noticed our chief compliance officer nodding particularly vigorously. That's actually why we've implemented emotional intelligence training in our compliance department, she offered. Recognizing behavioral patterns helps us identify potential issues before they become problems. The conversation expanded, with several colleagues sharing perspectives on the intersection of psychology and finance. Derek attempted to redirect the discussion multiple times, but Vanessa skillfully kept it flowing along the path she'd initiated, occasionally glancing at me with what seemed like appreciative collusion. By dessert, a subtle but significant shift had occurred. Derek was no longer controlling the evening's narrative, Vanessa was. And she had positioned me as an insightful voice worth listening to, directly contradicting Derek's recent efforts to undermine my standing. As coffee was served, Vanessa stood. I hope everyone will join me in the living room. I prepared a little surprise for Derek. We followed her lead, curious about this unexpected development. In the living room, she retrieved a wrapped package from behind a chair. As some of you know, tomorrow is Derek's birthday, she announced. Since you're all here, I thought we could celebrate a day early. Derek appeared genuinely surprised, whether by the gift or the public presentation of it, I couldn't tell. He accepted the package with a perfunctory smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You shouldn't have, darling, he said, the endearment sounding strangely hollow. Open it, she encouraged, her expression unreadable. Derek unwrapped the package to reveal a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with his initials. He looked up at Vanessa, confusion evident in his expression. It's a reflective journal, she explained, for recording thoughts, feelings, moments of insight. She glanced around the room, including everyone in her explanation. My research indicates that regular reflection improves decision-making and deepens relationship satisfaction. I thought it might be a meaningful practice for you. There was nothing overtly challenging in her words or tone, yet the gift itself was a pointed statement, encouraging emotional awareness in a man who prided himself on compartmentalization. The subtext was clear to anyone who knew Derek well. You need to develop the very qualities you dismiss as weaknesses. Thank you, Derek said stiffly. I'll certainly give it a try. The moment created a subtle awkwardness that shifted the evening's energy. Guests began making polite excuses to depart shortly afterward. I lingered just long enough to avoid appearing hasty, then approached Derek to thank him for the evening. Excellent dinner, Derek. Thank you for including me. His smile was tight, professional. Of course. We'll discuss that client communication strategy on Monday. Looking forward to it, I replied neutrally. As I turned to leave, Vanessa appeared beside me. Mitchell, don't forget that article I mentioned about financial trauma. I'll email you the link tomorrow. I appreciate that, I said, aware of Derek watching our exchange. It sounds relevant to several clients I'm working with. Exactly what I thought, she replied, her eyes holding mine a beat longer than necessary. Good night, Mitchell. Good night, Vanessa. Derek. I nodded to them both and departed, feeling the weight of Derek's gaze between my shoulder blades as I walked out. Driving home, I replayed the evening's events, trying to make sense of the complicated dynamics I'd witnessed. Vanessa had deliberately elevated my status in front of colleagues, directly challenging Derek's attempts to marginalize me professionally. She'd given Derek a gift that subtly criticized his emotional limitations. And she'd made it clear to everyone present that she and I shared an intellectual connection that Derek didn't participate in. But why? Was she simply tired of Derek's controlling behavior and using me as a convenient ally? Was she genuinely interested in my perspectives on emotional intelligence and financial advising? Or was there something more personal in her apparent championing of me? Whatever her motivations, I had been drawn into their relationship drama in a way that could have serious professional consequences. Derek was unlikely to forgive the public realignment of status that had occurred at his dinner table, in his own home, no less. I arrived at my apartment still turning these questions over in my mind. As I changed out of my dinner clothes, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Thank you for your contributions tonight. The conversation finally became interesting when you spoke up. I hope Derek's recent behavior hasn't discouraged you too much. Your approach to client care is exactly what the industry needs." I stared at the message, uncertain how to respond. Professional courtesy suggested I should acknowledge her support, yet the private text after hours, particularly following the evening's charged interactions, seemed to cross a boundary. Before I could decide, another text arrived. "I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I'd value your perspective on a project I'm developing, a workshop series for people experiencing financial transitions after relationship changes. Could we discuss it over coffee sometime?" Purely professional, of course. The purely professional qualifier set off alarm bells. When someone feels the need to explicitly state that an interaction is professional, it often signals awareness that it might appear otherwise. Still, I found myself typing a reply. "Thanks for your support this evening. The workshop sounds interesting and potentially valuable for many clients. Happy to discuss, but given recent tensions, perhaps we should include Derek or meet at the office?" Her response came quickly. "I understand your caution, but Derek is decidedly uninterested in the psychological aspects of financial advising, as he made clear tonight. Would meeting at the public library cafe be a suitable compromise? Open space, professional setting, no appearance of impropriety." It was a reasonable suggestion, yet I hesitated. Meeting Vanessa alone, even in a public setting, felt risky given Derek's obvious sensitivity about our interactions. On the other hand, refusing a straightforward professional discussion seemed overly cautious and potentially insulting to her. After several minutes of internal debate, I replied, "Library cafe works. Tuesday during lunch break, 12:30? Perfect. See you then. And thank you for being willing to share your expertise. Unlike some, you don't seem threatened by integrating emotional intelligence into financial practice." The dig at Derek was unmistakable, confirming my suspicion that I was being drawn into some ongoing conflict between them. Yet I couldn't deny a certain satisfaction in being recognized for the very qualities Derek had dismissed as weaknesses during my divorce. Over the weekend, I deliberately focused on personal projects rather than work concerns. I finally painted my apartment, replacing the sterile white with warm neutrals that made the space feel more like home. I assembled a bookshelf I'd purchased weeks earlier but hadn't found the energy to set up. Small steps toward rebuilding a life that felt like my own rather than just the hollow shell Eliza had left behind. Sunday dinner with my sister provided a welcome reality check. "So let me get this straight," Kate said after I explained the situation with Derek and Vanessa. "Your boss, who berated you for having normal human emotions during your divorce, is now jealous because his girlfriend thinks you're emotionally intelligent? And you're meeting her for coffee to discuss a project he's not interested in?" Put that way, it sounded like the setup for a workplace cautionary tale. "It's a professional conversation in a public place," I defended weakly. Kate gave me her patented big sister look of skepticism. "Mitch, you know I love you, but this has disaster written all over it. Either you're being manipulated in some power game between them, or there's genuine interest on her part, which is equally problematic given he's your boss. You think she's interested in me?" I couldn't keep the note of surprise from my voice. "Based on what you've described, absolutely. The question is whether it's personal interest or she's just using you to get a reaction from him." Kate took a sip of her wine. "Either way, you're the one with the most to lose here." "I know," I admitted. "But I'm curious about her workshop idea. It actually aligns with some approaches I've been considering for clients going through divorces or losing spouses." "Then suggest she present it at a proper office meeting. Or offer to review materials by email." Kate's expression softened. "Look, I know you're finally coming out of the Eliza fog, and it probably feels good to have an attractive, intelligent woman showing interest in your ideas. But this situation is complicated in ways that could blow up your career." She was right, of course. The rational move would be to cancel the meeting and maintain strict professional distance from both Derek and Vanessa. But rationality hadn't been my strong suit lately. Monday morning brought the expected confrontation with Derek about my client communication strategy. I'd spent several hours Sunday preparing a revised approach that maintained honest risk assessment while framing it more constructively. "This is better," Derek acknowledged grudgingly after reviewing the document. "Still more cautious than I'd prefer, but acceptable." "Thank you," I replied, maintaining a professional tone despite the backhanded approval. "I believe it strikes the right balance between transparency and confidence." Derek leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You made quite an impression at dinner Saturday." "Just participating in the conversation," I said carefully. Vanessa seemed particularly interested in your perspectives. His casual tone didn't match the intensity of his gaze. She mentioned she's consulting with you on some project, so she had told him about our planned meeting. That was reassuring, at least. She's developing a workshop series on financial transitions after relationship changes, I explained. Given my recent experience, she thought I might have useful insights. We're meeting at the library cafe tomorrow to discuss it. Derek nodded slowly. I see. Well, don't let it interfere with your actual responsibilities here. Of course not, I assured him. It's just a lunch break conversation. Good. Derek returned his attention to his computer, a clear dismissal. That will be all, Mitchell. I left his office feeling strangely unsettled. Derek's reaction had been more contained than expected, almost too controlled, as if he was deliberately masking stronger feelings beneath a veneer of professional indifference. The rest of Monday passed uneventfully. I focused on client work, deliberately avoiding office gossip and unnecessary interactions. By the time I left that evening, I had almost convinced myself that Tuesday's meeting with Vanessa was indeed just a straightforward professional discussion. The library cafe was moderately busy when I arrived at 12:25, filled with a mix of students, remote workers, and people having casual business meetings. I chose a table near the center of the room, visible from all angles, impossible to misconstrue as a secluded conversation. Vanessa arrived precisely on time, dressed in a professional but stylish outfit that somehow managed to be both appropriate and striking. She carried a leather portfolio and what appeared to be several psychology journals. Mitchell, thank you for meeting me, she said, settling into the chair across from me. I've been looking forward to continuing our conversation from the other night. The workshop series sounds interesting, I replied, deliberately focusing on the stated purpose of our meeting. I'm curious about your approach. Of course, she said, opening her portfolio to reveal neatly organized notes. I'm envisioning a 6-week program addressing different aspects of financial transition after relationship disruption, divorce, death of a spouse, even the merging of finances in new relationships. She outlined a thoughtful curriculum that integrated psychological healing with practical financial management. As she spoke, her genuine passion for helping people through difficult transitions became evident. This wasn't just some pretext for meeting me. She had clearly put substantial thought into the project. What's missing, she concluded, is the insider perspective on how financial institutions actually handle these situations. The real challenges clients face when trying to disentangle or reconstruct their financial lives. That's where I might be helpful, I acknowledged. There are numerous institutional barriers that most people don't anticipate until they're in the midst of the transition. For the next 45 minutes, we engaged in a productive exchange of ideas. I shared insights from my professional experience and my personal divorce journey. She offered psychological frameworks that helped explain client behaviors I'd observed but never fully understood. It was genuinely one of the most stimulating professional conversations I'd had in years. As our discussion wound down, Vanessa closed her portfolio with a satisfied smile. This has been incredibly valuable, Mitchell. Your insights will make this workshop series much more practical and applicable. Happy to help, I replied sincerely. It's a worthwhile project. A brief silence fell between us, the professional purpose of our meeting now fulfilled. The rational move would be to thank her, leave, and maintain the clear boundary we'd established. Instead, I heard myself ask, how did you and Derek meet? If you don't mind my asking. The question surprised her, her composed expression faltering momentarily. That's not what I expected you to ask. Sorry if it's too personal, I backpedaled. Professional curiosity got the better of me. No, it's fine, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. We met at a charity gala about a year ago. He was very charming, very attentive, pursued me quite determinedly. She paused. The intensity was flattering, I suppose. And now? The question slipped out before I could censor it. Vanessa studied me for a long moment, seeming to debate how much to reveal. Now I recognize that intensity isn't the same as intimacy. That attention isn't necessarily connection. The statement hung between us, laden with implications about her relationship with Derek. I knew I should change the subject, return to safer professional territory, but something in her expression, a vulnerability beneath the composed exterior, kept me engaged. That can be a difficult realization, I said carefully, especially after investing significant time in a relationship. Yes, she agreed, her gaze direct. Though sometimes the investment becomes more about avoiding the pain of acknowledgement than genuine hope for improvement. We psychology types aren't immune to our own defense mechanisms. None of us are, I acknowledged, thinking of how long I'd remained in denial about the problems in my own marriage. Mitchell, Vanessa said quietly, may I ask you something personal? Warning bells sounded in my mind, yet I nodded. You can ask. When did you know your marriage was over? Not when your wife left, but when did you, internally, recognize it couldn't be saved? The question pierced directly to a truth I rarely articulated, even to myself. When I realized I was performing the role of husband rather than actually being one, I admitted. Going through the motions without genuine connection. Maintaining the appearance of a relationship that had already hollowed out from the inside. Vanessa's expression reflected painful recognition. Yes, she whispered. Exactly that. The moment between us stretched, charged with mutual understanding and dangerous possibility. We were no longer discussing her workshop or my financial expertise. We were sharing intimate reflections on failed relationships, including her current one with my boss. I should get back to the office, I said, breaking the tension. Derek has me presenting to the investment committee at 2. Of course, Vanessa replied, gathering her materials. Thank you again for your input on the workshop. It was illuminating in multiple ways. We walked out of the cafe together, maintaining a professional distance as we crossed the library lobby. I'll email you some resources on financial PTSD that might be useful for your client work, she offered as we reached the street. I'd appreciate that, I replied. Good luck with the workshop development. Mitchell, she said as I turned to leave, her voice stopping me. If you ever want to continue our conversation, the personal parts, I'd welcome that. Sometimes it helps to process these experiences with someone who understands. The invitation was ambiguous, potentially innocent yet fraught with implications given our respective situations. I knew the smart response would be polite deflection. I'll keep that in mind, I said instead, neither accepting nor rejecting her offer. Take care, Vanessa. As I walked back toward the office, my mind churned with conflicting thoughts and emotions. The meeting had confirmed what I'd suspected. Vanessa's relationship with Derek was troubled, perhaps terminally so. She was clearly searching for the emotional connection Derek seemed constitutionally incapable of providing. And she had found something in our interaction that resonated with her, whether it was simply understanding, or something more complicated. The question was, what had I found in it? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? Derek's directive to be a better man echoed mockingly in my thoughts. By his definition, a better man would maintain strict professional boundaries, ignore any personal connection with Vanessa, and focus solely on rebuilding his career status. But I was beginning to understand that my definition of being a better man might be fundamentally different from Derek's, less about compartmentalization and more about authentic connection, less about power and more about empathy. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very qualities Derek had criticized during my divorce were the ones Vanessa seemed to value most in our interactions. The emotional intelligence he dismissed as weakness appeared to be exactly what his relationship lacked. As I entered the office building, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Thank you for your honesty today. It's rare to find someone who understands both financial and emotional complexity. I value that more than I can express in a text message. I stared at the message, knowing I shouldn't respond immediately, knowing I should maintain professional distance, knowing this was heading somewhere complicated. Yet as I stepped into the elevator, I found myself typing a reply. I valued our conversation too. Sometimes understanding is the most important thing we can offer each other. The doors closed as I hit send, carrying me up to the office where Derek waited, unaware that his directive to be a better man had set in motion consequences none of us could have anticipated. 3 weeks after the coffee meeting, I maintained careful distance from Vanessa. Our texts about her workshop remained professional, though the undercurrent of personal connection lingered beneath the surface. At work, Derek had shifted from hypercriticism to cold indifference, assigning me to a complex portfolio that consumed all my time, a professional challenge that felt suspiciously like punishment. Then came the email that changed everything. Mitchell, the community center has invited me to present a preview of the Financial Transitions workshop next Thursday evening. Would you consider participating as a guest speaker? Your perspective would add significant value, especially regarding practical aspects of financial recovery after divorce. I understand if professional considerations make this uncomfortable. No pressure. Vanessa. After careful consideration, I responded that I'd be willing to participate but thought we should be transparent with Derek. Her reply surprised me. I appreciate your integrity. I've already mentioned it to Derek, actually. He said, and I quote, Mitchell can do whatever extracurricular activities he wants as long as it doesn't affect his work performance. Not exactly enthusiastic support, but not prohibition either. The workshop itself went exceptionally well. Vanessa covered the psychological aspects of financial transition while I provided practical guidance on rebuilding financial independence. The audience, mostly divorce support group members and social workers, responded with genuine appreciation. One woman clasped my hand afterward, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for addressing the shame," she said quietly. "I've been divorced for 2 years and still haven't told my sister how bad the financial situation really is. Hearing you speak about it so openly, it helps." Her words touched me deeply. By sharing my experience, by being vulnerable rather than maintaining Derek's version of strength, I could actually help others heal. After the last attendees left, Vanessa suggested grabbing coffee to debrief. The cafe was quiet, our conversation remaining professionally focused as we discussed expanding the workshop into a regular series. Then her phone buzzed with a text from Derek asking when she'd be home. "Is everything okay?" I asked, noticing her expression shift. "No," she said simply. "It hasn't been for some time." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it despite our complicated dynamic. "It's my own fault, really," she continued. "I saw what I wanted to see in the beginning, ignored warning signs that were probably obvious to everyone else." "That's a common human experience," I offered. "We all have blind spots, especially when it comes to relationships." "The irony of a psychologist having such significant blind spots isn't lost on me," she said with a rueful smile. As our conversation veered into personal territory, she described feeling disconnected from Derek, unable to engage him emotionally. Derek believes relationship discussions are inefficient and that problems resolve themselves if you simply move forward productively. "That sounds familiar," I acknowledged. "His professional philosophy seems to extend to his personal life." "Exactly," Vanessa agreed. "Which is why tonight was so refreshing. Working with someone who understands that emotional intelligence and practical action aren't opposing forces but complementary ones." The implication was clear. I possessed qualities Derek lacked, qualities she valued. The realization created a dangerous current between us. "I should probably head home," I said, recognizing the precipice we were approaching. We said goodnight, and I drove home resolving to maintain professional distance going forward. It was the right decision, the ethical choice, the action of the better man I genuinely wanted to be, not Derek's version, but my own. The next morning, Tasha warned me that Derek was looking for me and seemed intense. Apparently, he and Vanessa had some kind of major fight the previous night. When I entered Derek's office, he was reviewing documents with deliberate focus, making me wait for his attention. "I understand you participated in Vanessa's workshop last night," he finally said, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "Yes," I confirmed. "She invited me to provide the financial perspective for her presentation on divorce transitions." "And afterward? What did that involve?" "We debriefed the workshop over coffee, discussing potential expansions of the program based on attendee feedback." It was a professional conversation in a public cafe, lasting approximately 1 hour. Derek's jaw tightened. "I see. And did this professional conversation include Vanessa sharing her personal frustrations about our relationship?" "Vanessa mentioned experiencing some communication challenges," I said carefully. "I didn't encourage personal disclosures and kept my own comments focused on the workshop content." "That's not what I heard," Derek said, his controlled facade cracking slightly. "In fact, I have it on good authority that you and Vanessa have been having quite meaningful exchanges about relationship dynamics." The phrasing suggested second-hand information rather than something Vanessa had told him directly. Was he bluffing? "Derek," I said, deciding directness was my best option, "Vanessa and I have been collaborating on a workshop series that inherently touches on relationship transitions. Any discussions about relationships have been in that professional context." "Professional," Derek repeated skeptically. "Like your professional text exchanges about emotional intelligence and financial trauma? Like your professional coffee meetings to debrief?" A chill ran through me. He had seen our text messages, either Vanessa had shown them to him voluntarily, or he had accessed her phone without permission. "Let me be very clear, Mitchell," Derek continued. "Whatever game you think you're playing with my girlfriend ends now. Your participation in her little community project is over. Any communication between you will go through me from this point forward." The naked attempt at control triggered something in me. All the months of Derek's condescension, his criticism during my divorce, his directive to be a better man while demonstrating the opposite, it crystallized into perfect clarity. "That's not your decision to make," I said quietly. Derek blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. "Excuse me? You don't get to dictate Vanessa's professional collaborations or her personal communications," I continued, my voice level but firm. That's her choice, not yours. And while you can certainly direct my work responsibilities here, you don't have the authority to control my activities outside this office. Color rose in Derek's face. You're forgetting your place, Mitchell. No, I'm remembering it precisely, I countered. My place is as a professional who maintains appropriate boundaries while contributing to community education in my field of expertise. My place is as a human being who deserves basic respect, both in and out of this office. Derek's expression darkened. This attitude isn't doing your career any favors. Perhaps not, I acknowledged. But it's doing wonders for my self-respect. We stood in tense silence, the power dynamic shifting in ways neither of us had anticipated. You should know that Vanessa and I had a significant conversation last night, Derek finally said. Whatever impression you might have about the state of our relationship is inaccurate. We're committed to working through our differences. I wish you both well with that. As for your role here, he continued, returning to his desk, I'll be reassigning the Blackwell portfolio to another advisor. You'll focus on maintaining your existing client relationships while I reassess your place in the team structure. It was a professional demotion, thinly veiled as a routine reassignment. I understand, I said simply. Back in my office, I received a text from Vanessa. I need to speak with you. Derek saw our messages last night while I was sleeping. Things have escalated in ways I didn't anticipate. Please call me when you can. I closed my door and called her immediately. Are you okay? I asked. Not really, she replied, her voice tight. Derek confronted me last night about our texts, accused me of emotional infidelity, demanded I end all contact with you. When I refused, it got ugly. Ugly how? I asked, alarmed. Not physically, she clarified quickly. But the level of control he tried to exert, the things he said, it was illuminating, and not in a positive way. I told him I was staying with a friend for a few days to reassess our relationship. I just had a similar conversation with Derek, I told her. Though he claimed you two had worked things out. That's Derek's reality revision at work, she said with a bitter laugh. He genuinely believes if he declares something to be true, it becomes true. She apologized for my involvement, and I assured her no apology was necessary. We agreed to pause any workshop collaboration until she had made decisions about her relationship with Derek, maintaining minimal contact to avoid exacerbating the situation. Over the next 2 weeks, Derek systematically dismantled my role, reassigning key clients, excluding me from strategic meetings, undermining my contributions. I began discreetly exploring other opportunities, prepared for the inevitable end of my tenure. Then came the Wednesday that changed everything. Tasha burst into my office, closing the door behind her. You need to know what's happening. Derek just called an emergency leadership meeting. He's accusing you of ethical violations, inappropriate relationship with a client's spouse, breach of confidentiality, everything short of actual fraud. That's completely fabricated, I said, shocked. I know. But Derek's building a case for termination, and he's got the senior partners listening. She hesitated. There's something else. Vanessa came to the office about 20 minutes ago, asked to see Derek. Melanie said she seemed very determined. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Thank you for the warning, I said, heading for the door. I think it's time I joined that meeting. I could hear raised voices as I approached the conference room, not Derek's controlled tones but a woman's voice, passionate and indignant. Vanessa. Without knocking, I opened the door to find Derek standing at the head of the table, senior partners seated around it looking uncomfortable, and Vanessa facing Derek with righteous anger. Mitchell, this is a private leadership meeting, Derek said, his expression shifting from shock to calculated control. You weren't invited. I understand you're discussing me, I replied calmly. It seems appropriate I should be present for that conversation. Actually, Mr. Evans was just sharing some concerns about your professional conduct, which Ms. Carter was contextualizing for us, said Catherine Walsh, a senior partner. He was lying, Vanessa said bluntly. Constructing elaborate fabrications about your behavior to justify removing you, all because you refused to stop associating with me. Vanessa, this isn't the appropriate forum for personal matters, Derek said tightly. It became the appropriate forum when you used your professional position to execute personal vendettas, she retorted before turning to the partners. Derek accessed my private messages without permission, has attempted to control my professional associations, and is now using his authority to punish someone whose only offense was treating me with respect. The senior partners exchanged uncomfortable glances. Perhaps we should continue this discussion with just firm leadership, suggested Martin Reynolds, the managing partner. With respect, I interrupted, I deserve the opportunity to address these accusations directly. Put on the spot, Derek faltered. As I explained, I have reason to believe Mitchell has engaged in inappropriate relationships with client connections, potentially compromising firm interests. Name the client, I challenged. Provide specific evidence. Confidentiality concerns prevent me from. There is no client, Vanessa interjected. The inappropriate relationship he's referencing is my professional collaboration with Mitchell on community education workshops, a collaboration Derek initially approved until he decided it threatened his control. Derek, these sound like differences in professional approach, not ethical violations, Martin observed. Why are we having an emergency meeting about this? Before Derek could respond, Vanessa spoke again, her voice quiet but clear. Because I ended our relationship last night and told Derek I was interested in exploring a connection with Mitchell once appropriate professional boundaries could be established. The revelation stunned everyone, myself included. While I had sensed potential between us, we had never discussed it directly. Derek's composure cracked entirely. You see? This confirms exactly what I've been saying. They've been carrying on behind my back, undermining my position here. That's completely false, I stated firmly. Until this moment, Vanessa and I have never discussed any romantic interest. Our interaction has been limited to professional collaboration. After uncomfortable discussion, the senior partners concluded that the allegations against me were unsubstantiated and potentially motivated by personal rather than professional concerns. Martin asked me to remain behind while the others departed. This has been enlightening, Martin said once we were alone. I apologize for the unprofessional situation you've been placed in. Thank you, I replied simply. I understand you've been exploring other opportunities, he continued. I'd like to request you delay any decisions until we've discussed your future here more thoroughly. Recent events have highlighted some leadership concerns that may result in organizational changes. The implication was clear, Derek's position was in jeopardy, and the firm wanted to retain me. Outside the building, I found Vanessa waiting, her expression a mixture of determination and uncertainty. That wasn't how I planned to tell you, she said. About ending things with Derek, or about my interest in you. The circumstances forced my hand. I know the timing is complicated, she continued. Your professional situation with Derek, my recent breakup, it's not exactly an ideal foundation. No, I agreed. It's not. I meant what I said in there. There has been nothing inappropriate between us. But there has been a connection, an understanding that I haven't found elsewhere. And once appropriate time has passed, I'd like to explore that. I value our connection too, I said carefully. But we both need space, you to process your relationship ending, me to stabilize my professional situation. Whatever might develop between us deserves a clean beginning, not one tangled in the aftermath. Relief softened her features. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. A thoughtful response rather than an impulsive one. I've had some practice lately with choosing careful reflection over immediate reaction, I said with a small smile. Being a better man, she suggested, a knowing look in her eyes. Something like that, I agreed, though my definition differs significantly from Derek's. I noticed, she said softly. It's what drew me to you in the first place. 2 months later, Derek resigned, accepting a position with a competitor across the country. The official announcement cited new opportunities, though office gossip suggested the senior partners had made it clear his leadership approach no longer aligned with firm culture. I remained, accepting a promotion to lead a new division focused on comprehensive life transition planning, integrating traditional financial advising with awareness of the emotional aspects of major life changes. 3 months after that, when appropriate time had passed and boundaries were clearly established, Vanessa and I had our first official date at a small Italian restaurant far from the financial district. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. And to unexpected paths, I added. As our glasses clinked, I reflected on Derek's directive to be a better man. In trying to enforce his version of masculinity, emotionless, compartmentalized, focused solely on professional success, Derek had ultimately revealed his own limitations. True strength wasn't about suppressing emotions or maintaining rigid control, it was about authentic connection, emotional intelligence, and the courage to remain true to one's values even when doing so carried risk. Ironically, in telling me to be a better man, Derek had set in motion a journey that led me to define that concept for myself, and to find someone who valued the very qualities he had dismissed as weaknesses. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living authentically, guided by your own values rather than someone else's expectations. It's finding connection with people who see your vulnerability as strength, your empathy is wisdom, your authenticity is courage. And sometimes, it's becoming the very better man your critic demanded, just not in the way they intended.